On this episode of ResiWeek, CEDIA releases a white paper on HDMI 2.1. Google has eliminated a product line or eliminating the hardware version, and Lutron Alisse. All that and more next on ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ResiWeek, episode 247, recorded Monday, October 26th, 2020. It's Googled.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Vanco International. Learn the technology behind the award-winning EVOIP, AV over IP system. Become EVOIP certified today.
And by
Peerless AV, driving technology through innovation.
This is ResiWeek, the weekly look at the residential market. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered for this week. First and foremost, Joe Whitaker from Thoughtful Integrations in my hometown, St. Louis. Welcome, sir.
Nice to be back on this show. It's always a good time.
And if you're not watching the video, please go by and look at it because Joe is sitting virtually in front of his award-winning Rava Theater, home theater, CEDIA award-winning. Welcome.
And if you want to check out that theater, by the way, you can go check it out. Open demo right in Dallas.
Oh, there you go. All right. So they can just walk into the people's house. What?
It's a huge model home.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
So there's people there, educate them, walk them right through it. If you're an integrator, go learn about it.
All right. Very cool. Also with us is one of my favorite CEOs. His name is Dave Bedigo. He is from RLX. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to me and you don't hear any bouncing around, that's because of Dave, because we've got RLX here in the AVNation studios. And last but not least, I guess technically my boss, what he claims to be, my buddy, Mr. Bradford Ben from AVNation, also looking at his next opportunity to take over the world. How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little confused. It's not AV week, so I'm gonna have to be on my good behavior so that, you know, Joe and Dave don't bat me about the head and chest as I make fun of the some of the Resi topics that I don't understand.
You understand most of them. And here's the weird thing. I'm hosting.
I own a house, so I figure I'm qualified.
And you own a smart house. We can have that conversation about how smart your house was not.
I use HDMI cables. I have control panels. I have Lutron stuff. We can talk about all this stuff.
All right. Well, you have Lutron. I know that. All right. Let's continue. We'll get to the Lutron story here in a second. First one though, from CE Pro. Google, surprise, surprise, is pulling the plug on something, and I'm somewhat sarcastic there. They are discontinuing Nest Secure Alarm System. From the article, quote unquote, the Google Nest Secure Alarm System was first brought to market in 2017. The focal point of the system was the system's hockey puck shaped component with a keypad. However, they are getting rid of it. The article quotes both Verge and Android Central. Joe, we'll start with you on this. One of the parts that makes Google interesting is the ability and the willingness to throw a lot of money at projects, at ideas. They famously have a 10% project where employees are encouraged to, use 10% of their time to come up with new and innovative applications. The downside is eventually some would argue a majority of these will not make it for the long haul. If you're building a home automation system or you're building a home automation business based on the back of Google, that is one of the risks you run. How big of a deal is this that they're doing away with Secure?
It's a big deal, more so in that it's an eye opener. This year we're starting to see Nest already making some moves. They just announced their new thermostat, which I have to say is sexy. Will I use it? No, but it is sexy. but it's an eye opener just in the fact that we saw a lot of consumer modeled corporations. Amazon, we saw Google, we saw a handful of them dive their hands into things that they don't necessarily need to be involved with, security being one of them. We know from our side of the pond, and the integrator side of the pond, those of us who do deal with security and have security licenses know that there's a lot of legalities and federal regulations and all kind of stuff that actually goes with saying You have a monitored security system or fire or smoke or whatever the case may be. And when you have somebody like this come in and say, oh, here's this thing you can just buy off of the internet and put in, and you can feel safe and all that. It's built for disaster. They're not built to, house or manage or deploy that kind of thing. So great experiment by Google to prove what us as integrators already knew, because I'll tell you, I've, installed a lot of security systems in my life, and I've never even touched one of those. So blip on the radar, absolutely. Great experiment proving a point that all us integrators already knew.
All right. Mr. Pedigo, one of the aspects of this news comes on the heels of Google investing almost $500 million, $450 million, into ADT. How much of a factor do you think that had to play into this decision, when the fact that Google, like Joe said, has recognized the fact that you've got individual states and sometimes individual regions and municipality regulations to factor in, letting ADT, which is part of what the original story was about, folks were saying, well, they're just going to let ADT handle some of that, and they're going to get into it by stepping back, but investing in there. How much of a factor do you think the ADT investment had in this?
I would think it was almost the inverse, that the failure of their ability to really crack into the security market that way was, all right, well, let's go and invest in, the largest home provider in the country. Hardware only gets you so far. And so when you look at, ADT as an example, you're talking about decades of experience and understanding. And so Google wants to get in one way or another. And their ultimate motives are always to understand the customer more so that they can market to that customer. So they wanted to penetrate the security market one way or another. They figured out that their hardware wouldn't work, so they'll just backdoor it in with their overabundance of cash, in my opinion.
All right. Bradford, taking a look at this both from someone who used to work for a manufacturer, but also, a homeowner as well. When you look at statements like this, when you kill off a product line, what sort of steps do you have to take with the integration community? I mean, how much of a roadmap or a runway do you have to give them to say, you know what, we're doing away with this in 6 months or a year? Or can you just pull the plug and say, sorry guys, here's the alternative, here's the replacement?
Well, that's one thing. As I was reading about this on Google Plus a little bit, that was a throwback joke. Everyone laughed.
Very nice.
Canceled.
It was a solid.
I was actually looking at this. They are not discontinuing Google Nest. They are stopping building products. And there's a slight difference. It's exactly that question of when can you pull the plug? Well, because they're still supporting it, but not building the product. The product is end of life, but the service isn't. Now, I don't know all of the rules and how they're going to transfer stuff over, but there is a certain period of time that they have to support it under warranty. But here's where it gets into that fuzzy area. You don't own it. It's software as a service. It's this and that. So how that lays out, I'm not really 100% sure. I'm sure I could call Josh Schrago, as the budding lawyer he is, and give us a lot of information. But that is one of those things. Like, for instance, I have a master lock that's Bluetooth controlled, and they are changing the software on it. The lock still works. It's just different features. Same thing with Smart Things that just updated and got rid of Smart Things Classic a couple of weeks ago. The products still work. The software has been discontinued. So that's more where they're at. Now, the $450 million into ADT, that is the one that has me scratching my head the most. The reason is because ADT and Samsung or Smart Things already have an arrangement and an agreement together. And Samsung sells ADT monitoring systems, and ADT can put in the Smart Things stuff for you. So that's the one that I'm kind of trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. Is it they're spending the money to push out other companies, or is it that they want to make sure that they don't get locked out? I think that's the interesting part. I also think one of the downfalls is it's Google. And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, and Google does a lot of amazing things. But how many people knew that it had a microphone in it, or that the Nest thermostat had a microphone in it? And I think it's starting to come back and haunt Google a little bit. And that's part of the reason they're starting to pull back to stuff that is more known, because like you said, the home security, who are they going to call? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? That's a great service. Do I want them to know when I'm home or not home, who's home, and all this other stuff? Not so much. So I think from a Google standpoint, they're cutting their losses. And I think that the buying into ADT makes sure that they can still integrate with ADT for their smart home products. But I think they're not looking at it as we are going to be your home security system. They're looking at it the way they looked at Google Voice of, we're going to provide you an entire ecosystem. You don't have to think about it. But I think as Joe pointed out, there are a lot of legalities that they weren't expecting. And some of those include false alarms and all those other things that happen. And I think part of it is, I don't think Google has the infrastructure to set up for people calling and going, my alarm's going off, what do I do?
Thanks so mumuch for watching this first segment of ResiWeek. To check out the rest of the episode for free, click on the link below or go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.